Welcome to Live from America podcast, Noam's favorite podcast. Uh, Noam Dworman is here. Hello, sir, owner of the comedy Cellar. How you doing?
Hello, hello, hello.
And as usual, one of my favorite guests. We love to have you once in a while. One of the top legal analysts in the country and a great guy, MSNBC legal analyst, Mr. Danny Cevallos.
Oh, thank you, fellas. And I don't want to pull back the curtain, but in this Yule tide, I mean, I'd also add that Hatem and Noam have become my really good buddies personally. And think about it. I think I've been doing your show for close to a decade, if that's possible.
Wow, 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 wow.
Yeah,
You can
yeah,
believe that.
it's amazing. And you are a combination of somebody who's like it's so much, like Norm was saying earlier, it's so easy not to prepare for podcasts, not to just know that you're gonna have a great time. So
Thank you. Actually, that is one of the reasons I think I've survived in this business long enough because when I do TV or any show, my goal is to make it the least amount of work for the host. My nightmare scenario is, and I hear comics make fun of this all the time, like your Paris Hilton who shows up on a Letterman is just like, I don't know, I like to do stuff. That is my worst fear. So I really try to bring it, and thank you. That is a high compliment, especially from you two. You two who are legends in the business that I am so fascinated and interested in.
and
Oh
and to
my God,
return
the
to
the
this show.
hyperbole is I gotta check my blood sugar. But go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, come on, of course. You are. Noam, you don't like compliments, but it's true. Hatem loves them.
Oh yeah, that's fine. No, Norm's love them too. I just pretend. But and actually, it's a great compliment that you return to the show because most people when Norm is around, they don't return. But
I know you're being funny, but
No,
the one thing I learned
no, I'm
early
not.
on this show is that you have to come ready. You're not going to have a host who's just going to just sort of passively accept whatever you say. This is a host that's going to push back. And the first few times I was on, man, my heart rate was up. I was game time performance. It was. I'm serious. I mean, because you had to be ready. You can't just give a packaged answer on this show.
I,
well, those days are over. There was there was one issue really, which was it was a big issue, a compound issue, which was everything that revolved around the accusations against Trump, Russiagate, his mental health, all the legal, all of it, all that stuff. And I was hyper informed about that stuff. Like I don't know what got me going about that stuff, and I was ready to take on the world about that stuff because, and by the way, you and I weren't actually that far apart. I
No.
don't even remember if we were far apart. You were, especially for an MSNBC. My God, you were like a profile in courage, meaning that like no, I mean actually mean it's like
You're
we're
so
all
right. I know what you mean.
because this I mean I don't want to get sidetracked, but it's interesting. Like we're all very affected by our environment. It's very
Sure.
tough to be within that environment in the years like 2016 to 2019, whatever it was, and not be affected by the gravitational forces of just everybody in your world in terms of seeing things in a particular way. And you actually really didn't buckle. So
Well, thank you.
that speaks a lot about you. Yeah, but
It's
anyway,
funny.
since then
Yeah.
I don't know anything. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, me neither. So I have to say, it's so funny you say that and you were a very, very vocal minority during the Russia investigation. And
Yeah.
looking back on it in retrospect, I was often on when I was on MSNBC, as you folks know, this is my first show with you since MSNBC split. I'm no longer with MS. I'm with NBC News only, so I'm not
Oh,
allowed to
good.
do MS anymore. They left the building. They're long gone. But a lot of the folks who are sort of their signature legal analysts, a lot of them are former federal prosecutors. And the thing that surprised me is that when I started being on with them and they were so almost, uniformly very critical of Trump, I thought, this doesn't make sense. Prosecutors, I thought, were always conservative. And here I am, the defense attorney, and I find myself at times, I wouldn't say defending Trump, but I'm not always anti-Trump. And you'd think most defense attorneys are dyed-in-the-wool Democrats. And that's not always true either. I would say there certainly are a lot. And that perplexed me. And then I realized, former federal prosecutors, these are folks who are institutionalists. If they have a religion, it is that the institution is the path to enlightenment. And I'm using a little hyperbole myself. And these people are my friends. They're brilliant. They're very accomplished folks. But I think ultimately that is why a lot of people who are former prosecutors have a lot of tissue rejection of Trump, because he represents to them a threat to the institution, to the establishment. And that in many ways is their one true religion, that they've devoted their lives to the institution, and therefore Trump represents a threat to that. So that's my own armchair psychiatric, completely worthless view
Can,
of
can
why
I
that might be.
can I take it to another level even? One of the lessons that I've learned, and I forget it, I've learned and I forget it, and I grapple with it probably for the rest of my life, is the worthlessness of brilliance. We would all suspect that with brilliant people, they would have they would be clear-eyed and more objective, and
Right.
that you could trust. And I brought this up one time to Tyler Cowen, and the economist, and also brilliant. He says, well, the brilliant people use the brilliance in service of their emotions, which makes them even, more
Sure.
dangerous as it were. The more
Sure.
dangerous was my ad. And that's what it is, because in a physics lab, you need raw IQ power. Like, I'm sure we all probably look at some of these mathematicians and physicists and say, well, I could just never do that. You could hold a gun to my head and give me 100 years. I could never do it. But the truth is, like a lot of these legal concepts, you don't need to be fucking brilliant to be able to understand the logic of many of these things, right? You just don't. It's a matter of character and personality, really, which is what separates the good analysts from the bad. And I think that you have a particular personality. I'll give a shout out to Ellie Honig on CNN.
Oh, yeah.
He's pretty much unaffected by what he knows he's supposed to say.
Absolutely. Yes.
And that's a huge advantage for him in life.
It
Yeah.
is, absolutely. And Ellie
Yeah.
is very successful for that reason. I admire him, and he's terrific. He's a
Yeah.
friend. And he and I, I think we agree on a lot of on a lot of those positions. And I think it's driven by our experience in litigation, him as a career prosecutor, me as a defense attorney. And I don't want to say it makes you agnostic, but it makes you look at each case differently. Each case is different. And so there really aren't a lot of rules about people or politicians or anything. And here's the other thing you learn is that both sides are right and both sides are wrong. Both
That's
sides are,
right.
advancing their argument, and both sides are stretching the limits. So everybody's a little incredible, and by incredible I mean not credible. So, including me when I handle cases as well. So I get it.
And just to add to
And
that, the brilliance that part that Noam says, it's the same thing with the debate. Only you win the debate not because you know better, just because you have
Right.
a better charisma and stuff like that. And behind the scene with preparing for podcasts, just like you use the Trump example, but it's like the same thing with COVID, same thing with the Israel Gaza war. It's like we just find out that a lot of the experts, I don't know why they're expert, they really don't know. And they stick to one side and they try to defend that side, regardless of like so when
Mhm.
we try to challenge them there, they're not used to that challenge, so
That's right.
which is
That's
great.
right.
All right, let's go to the we'll discuss some of the biggest, legal stories, obviously, including the Epstein files. I have so many for you.
oh, brother, yeah,
Oh my
which
gosh.
But before that, let's start with Nick Reiner, likely not bleeding not guilty. What's your thoughts on that? Is that a strategy? Do um, you see this is working for him? What do you think, Danny? And what's the
Nick
latest?
Reiner. What? Wait, now, sir. What's the? Oh, Nick Reiner. I thought you said Nick Reiner. Oh, I've been all over the Nick Reiner case. Nick Reiner's been crazy. Okay. So here's the thing about the Nick Reiner case. We don't have a lot of information yet.
just
But
tell us who that is.
oh yeah, sure. I'll do correspondent, then I'll do analyst. Okay.
Okay.
Nick Reiner is the son of famed movie
Ah,
director.
Nick. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. Do it. Yeah.
Famed movie director. What? Wait, I was going to say Carl Reiner.
Rob
Wait,
Rob
Reiner.
Rob
Reiner.
Reiner. Jeez, I'm terrible this
Reiner.
morning.
Reingold Reiner.
Yes, yes. Rob Reiner, who came to fame, and Noam and I would remember. Hatem is too young, but as Meathead on Archie Bunker, which, back in an era of 3 television channels, everybody knew who Meathead was. But over the years, he's responsible for some of the great movies of our era, A Few Good Men, what else? Harry Met Sally, some of the classics, Like 'Em or Love 'Em. I mean, they're part of my youth. They're part of moviedom as I grew up. Now, apparently, after Conan O'Brien's Holiday Party, where Nick Reiner, his Rob Reiner's son, was acting a little strangely, the next morning, Rob Reiner and his wife were found dead, I believe, stabbed to death. And, a lot of this is still alleged, so just assume everything I say is alleged. But Nick Reiner was apprehended not too long afterward. He has been held without bail. And his attorney, very, very accomplished attorney, Alan Jackson, who you may remember from the Karen Reed case of recent infamy, is representing Nick Reiner. What he's done is he's continued his arraignment until January. It looks like he might need some mental health treatment or some other needed delay by the defense. But we don't have any evidence really yet, other than police suspect him. But I suspect we're going to learn that Nick Reiner did not do a very good job of covering his tracks, and that this is going to be a pretty difficult case for the defense. And for that reason, you might look to see an insanity or some version of diminished capacity defense. If there is absolutely no other option, that might be the best avenue for the defense. But those are notoriously difficult to win, a not guilty by reason of insanity. And there's a really interesting history of the insanity defense that dates not just back to the 1700s, but probably the most recent flashpoint would have been the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan, which again, Noam and I remember, young Hatem may not so much, but that was a major, major changing point in the use of the insanity
We
defense in
study
American
these
courts.
things back home.
I see. On a CD-ROM, I'm sure. So that's the current status of the Nick Reiner case. It seems like a really, really difficult case for the defense, but of course, it's high profile because it involves a very, very famous director and his wife, and it is a very sad case. And I wouldn't be surprised if, even though he's gone out and hired one of the best defense attorneys money can buy, in all likelihood, right now, I'm feeling like this might be heading toward an insanity plea of some kind.
Well, TMZ
Danny,
reported. Yeah, I'm
I,
just gonna add that TMZ did report that they are going with the insanity plea.
all right, I have a question, by the way, and then I really want to get to Epstein, which I have strong feelings about. Um, I understand, we all understand that the system requires everybody to have a lawyer, and it is wrong. And we've seen some of this in recent years. That guy at Harvard who was involved with the Epstein case, the black lawyer, I forget his name, who had to leave the dorm. He was like the supervisor of the dorm at Harvard and the kids wanted him out because he had the nerve to help with the Epstein defense. But anyway, nevertheless, I am always curious about what goes on in the minds of someone who is working to get off someone who they know has done something terrible and might likely do it again if they're successful in getting him off. You have any insight into that psychology?
Why? Yes. I mean, you're talking about the sworn duty of defense attorneys like me. And here's the thing. I get asked this all the time. How can you defend someone you know is guilty? Well, there's a lot of layers to that question. First of all, a lot of folks are surprised to learn it's very rare that a client tells you they're guilty. Quite the opposite. The biggest challenge for defense attorneys is dealing with a constant flow of I'm innocent, which, you need look no further than the prisons. Good luck finding, you may remember from Shawshank Redemption, the running joke that, hey, we're all innocent in here. I think it was Red that made that joke. But it's true. I mean, when I get letters from people who see me on TV in prison, they're all the same. I'm innocent, I'm innocent, I'm innocent. So it's a very small fraction of clients that tell you they're innocent. And it's a rare situation that I even ask the question. I don't, for a number of reasons. It makes it easier for me to do my job if I don't know. For example, if a client tells a defense attorney, okay, I did it, but I want you to put on this defense that's total BS, and I want you to put me on the stand, I can't do that. I can't suborn or ask for perjury. So generally speaking, most defense attorneys don't bother to ask, did you do it? But we usually don't have to because they're tripping out of themselves to tell you, I didn't do it, I didn't do it, I didn't do it.
But
Now,
often you know, right? Often you know the evidence is overwhelming.
Kind of like Tommy Lee Jones and The Fugitive.
I mean, certainly they knew OJ was guilty, right? They knew.
not them, that was funny. Uh,
Uh,
I know
well,
it didn't get
here's the
enough
thing.
credit.
so-
Did OJ's defense team know he was guilty? I believe they did. I mean, OJ is a strange example because OJ has made life very difficult for criminal defense attorneys for the last several decades because it created this perception for a long time. Maybe not quite so much now, but Noam, you'll remember in the 90s and 2000s, there became this nationwide perception that a high-priced defense attorney just gets every guilty person off, and that is
Right, right,
not
right,
what happens. And
right.
in fact, a small part of what I do is take cases to trial. Mark Garagos puts it this way, and I use it. He's a famed L.A. defense attorney and a friend, and he puts it in such a perfect, folksy way. A lot of what we do is give our clients a soft landing because we are going to lose the vast majority of our cases. In federal court, 90% of federal court, criminal court cases end in guilty pleas. And of those 10 that go to trial, and my God, it feels like I have all of those 10% because my clients always want to go to trial. Of those 10% that go to trial, 90+% of them are found guilty. Now, I'm not good at math, but I think if you 90% 90%, it gets you up to 95, 96%. So the odds are against us. The only time, we have a fighting chance is in maybe a city criminal court where DAs are disorganized and they can't marshal all their cops. But for the most part, being a criminal defense attorney is going up against overwhelming odds. Because look, I'll say it, and this may sound like heresy for a defense attorney, but it's not. More often than not, the person in the defense chair, they usually get it right. I mean, they usually get the right guy in there. So a lot of what we are doing isn't getting people acquitted. It's basically giving our clients the softest landing. So, I mean, for example, it is sometimes the case that if you win, the best example is a suppression motion. If you watch the Luigi Mangione, if you've been following that story, right now they are in the longest suppression motion hearing that I've known of in my life. They've been in it for 2.5 weeks. It just ended. But that's an example of if they win that motion, they'll throw out evidence of guilt. By definition, throwing out evidence in a suppression motion sets a guilty person free. The Mangione case won't end. There are cases that do end if you win a suppression motion. For example, if it's a drug case and the drugs are the suppressed item, then there's no more case.
Mhm.
Mangione, that case will move on even if the defense wins. But those motions are very rare in that they're very hard to win. But the bottom line is, how do I handle? Well, ultimately, if it's a case where I'm certain that someone's guilty, I do think of it as our sworn noble constitutional duty to give someone the very best defense. Because as a society, would we be happier using all the resources of the government to beat up on a defendant with no resources and send them to prison? Or is it more satisfying knowing that they had every opportunity to present every defense and they were still found guilty? That's satisfying to me. And I'm a defense attorney. The idea that everyone's had every possible opportunity so that when we institute punishment, we've used all the possible safeguards.
Yeah,
Knowing that, yeah, go ahead.
absolutely. And I'll just tell a quick little story, and then, but this is a good jumping into Epstein. So, I've noted, I've tried to keep a list of like all the ridiculous coincidences that have happened to me in my life, and you need to take that. No, okay. So I was driving with a girlfriend uh, uh, in countryside in Italy somewhere, starving on a highway. You've been there, right? It's like a little, and you see off the highway, you see a sign, Ristorante. It's, oh God, let's go. So we drive off the highway, and in the middle of nowhere, get to the restaurant. It's 10 minutes after the hours of the restaurant. It said to the woman, she's probably the wife of the owner, we're starving. Is there anything you can give us to eat? She goes, let me go ask the chef. She says she went in. I asked the chef. He says if you take only pasta, he'll make something for you. I said, oh my God, thank you so much. Please, if the chef could come out, I want to say thank you to him. So the chef walks out. He looks at me. He says, Comedy Cellar?
No.
Yeah, and it turned out he used to cook at Minetta Tavern across the street. And my initial reaction to that at the time was, do you know there are people doing life in prison on evidence just as unlikely as this.
Yeah,
Like if I had to get off by saying no, 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 this coincidence happened to me,
right.
and the jury would say, no fucking way, we're gonna believe that you drove. Like, you understand my point?
Yeah, of course.
So you think you know who's guilty, but you never really. I get in most in many cases, even what you think you know is true, it could actually not be true,
Absolutely.
and only through the procedure can you really test it.
Exactly
So
right.
But I
yeah, yeah.
except if it's like if you're trying to play insanity, then you kind of said, yes, I did it, but I'm insane.
And wait, hold
Oh,
on, hold on. Let's go because so anyway, but this thing about a soft landing. This is really the origins of the Epstein story, isn't it?
mhm.
Because he was involved in a lot of stuff with a lot of women and a lot of accusations, and his attorneys somehow, and this is similar to OJ, with well connected and blah blah blah, and they got him a very soft and inappropriately, I think we all agree as citizens, an
Yeah.
inappropriately soft landing
OJ,
in
right?
that
Yes,
original.
absolutely.
No, I'm talking about Epstein.
Oh, Epstein. Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
In 2009, of course,
yeah,
2008,
yeah.
2009 in Florida. Absolutely.
Which is where all this now stems from, the fact that he got off, they claimed he was intelligent, all this nonsense. So where are you now on the Epstein files? And let me just add at the top of it, I'm very offended at the idea like Larry Summers' life is trashed because his emails are being released. I can't even understand that. We can get to that. But what's your take on the Epstein thing?
Yeah, what's interesting is I actually have an Epstein adjacent case and here in federal court in New York. And I'm wondering if I could be in the Epstein files. It's possible if the DOJ is collecting public filings on this lawsuit. So you're right
We
in that.
we still have a spot for you right here, Danny. Don't worry.
Yeah. But I mean, you're absolutely right. And the statute itself that authorizes or requires the release of these documents explicitly says it shall not be a reason that to withhold documents that it might be incredibly embarrassing for people. And the only people that are to be protected are essentially victims.
Victims.
Victims are minors and or in many cases both. And by the way, almost by definition, a lot of people are, I think, correctly concluding that when somebody's face is blacked out, they are a victim. So this is a really, really fascinating thing for a criminal defense attorney like me because we virtually never get a wholesale look into the DOJ's files. We usually get what they want to give us or what they are very strictly required to give us. Folks would be surprised to learn that in federal court, discovery is not all that broad. It's very narrowly defined. So to see DOJ have to turn all these documents over, irrespective of who they hurt, and people are talking about how many terabytes of documents there are, but I mean, this was an investigation that went on for now. What are we at? We're at well over a decade. So there's going to be tons of court cases, tons of documents, and there are, as I expected, tons of redactions. I mean, on the whole, do I think here's my view on the whole Epstein saga, which is whatever opportunity authorities had to go after Epstein and his circle, that was back in '09. The photographs and things that are emerging of people like Bill Clinton, I mean, are terrible for them from a public relations perspective. I don't think we're going to see a lot of criminal responsibility, but you can see, for example, how a lot of people are going to be damaged by the release of these documents because they're just going to be in there. I mean, the stigma of being just in the Epstein documents, even if you sent somebody an email. One of the things that has to be released, by the way, is internal emails and communications by DOJ. Wow. I mean, I haven't seen those yet, but what an unprecedented glimpse into the inner thinking of DOJ that you just don't normally get. So I am fascinated. And admittedly, I'm only a fraction of the way through. I find it actually better to kind of look on social media and see what other sleuths have found really interesting. Because I mean, I just can't scroll through thousands of pages of redactions. And
Yeah.
people have found some interesting things. I think so far, unless something broke overnight, the most damaging are things like pictures of Bill Clinton in a pool with a redacted photo of a victim. But here's the other thing. I mean, is it slimy? Yeah, it looks very creepy. But at the same time, if there is some explanation for it, a lot of these other folks, I'll give you an example. There's a picture of Mick Jagger and I think Bill Clinton just at dinner. They're not doing anything. They're just at dinner. and now they're part of the Epstein files. So I'm sure they're none too pleased about that as well. But I think Bill Clinton has some accountability here, moral accountability, because some of those pictures are kind of fishy, knowing what we know about what Epstein was up to.
Well, the case of Larry Summers very deeply disturbs me because just and in my to my way of thinking, the right of association is a constitutional right. It's very sacred. Certainly, the right of a person who's done his time to go back into society, a free man, and to be associated with is very important to us. There's no reason to think, not that this is even relevant actually to my way of thinking, but to other people's it is. There's no reason to even think that Larry Summers had some kind of extensive knowledge of what Epstein was into or was involved in or was the details
Right.
of his criminal case. So there, Larry Summers, writes emails to this free man, Jeffrey Epstein, and they have a friendship, and he's talking about personal stuff with his love life and things like that. And I cannot come up with any reason under the sun why Larry Summers' emails should be released by the government as if it's the right thing to do because the mob demands it. And I had
Right.
this argument with a civil libertarian friend of mine who was getting squishy on it. It's like, well, but the transparency in the country, it essentially I want to be fair to his point of view, but essentially that this is such a hot issue that it kind of needs we need to soothe it. And I was like, well, okay, but what if in Larry Summers' emails he wasn't discussing his own love life, but he was discussing some very personal problem of his daughter or of his wife? Would we say it's okay for 1 degree of separation for their lives to be implicated? And I said, and if the answer is no, then what you're saying is that somehow he kind of deserves it because he was friends with Epstein. We would never want his wife's secrets to be released. She's an innocent here, but Larry Summers was friends with Jeffrey Epstein, and that's just not quite innocent. That's absolutely offensive to anybody who understands our system. And I don't know if I don't know. Larry Summers is not a friend of mine. I find my old Louis muscle being activated here. I don't know why
Yep.
nobody's sticking up for him. I find it disgusting. So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, here's I there's a lot you said that I really agree with because when you think of the motivation behind the statute that Congress passed in order to release these documents, to me, what it feels like is, without saying it in the statute, is the sentiment I feel like I've heard for a while, which is we want to see if there are rich and powerful people that were involved in Epstein's heinous crimes. That's what we want. We
Right.
want to see if
Yes.
rich and powerful, because we don't care if they're not rich and powerful, right? Does anybody care? No. And by the way, that's why there's language in the statute. It shall not be a reason to withhold documents that the person is essentially rich and powerful. I've never seen language like that in a statute. And that signals to me that that's really what this is about. Who do we know who's famous? And will we find this interesting? And there's a good reason.
Powerful more than famous, I think, is the
I
thing.
agree. Yeah. Yeah. By the way, and that's why I actually thought, I mean, it's famous and it's also powerful because part of this is about who in the hallways of power are part of this horrible trafficking ring.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we talk about transparency, but the strange thing is we often talk about things like transparency in absolutes. We often talk about our constitutional rights in absolutes, but we all know that none of them are absolute. Your First Amendment right is very circumscribed. There are plenty of limitations on your First Amendment right to speak. And so transparency is also circumscribed, and we've had well-developed good reasons for that. You look at the grand jury, for example. The grand jury rules are I mean, the grand jury, the federal grand jury is shrouded in secrecy by rule, by statute. It's required for a number of reasons, so that number one, the people who come in and testify as witnesses aren't put out on blast and subject to repercussions. And also, people who are investigated but not indicted are supposed to remain, not undamaged by this process. And as much as there's the part of me that is curious about what's in the documents, I also have to be honest with myself and say, well, that interest is a prurient interest. It's an interest in the same way I would, grab an Us magazine from the aisle at the grocery store. It's
Absolutely.
it's a gossip interest, and but it also, I mean, make no mistake about it, it's as damaging in a way and I don't want to make this is not a perfect analogy, but when there were the Sony leaks of all the emails and everything, and that was, that was devastating to people. And this is kind of like that. People who send him an email, and look, you can have a discussion about, hey, if somebody has served time for, a sex offense, is that someone you should never talk to? Well, I'm a criminal defense attorney, so I'm going to say, generally no. I mean, it's a case by case basis, but can you criticize people for having an email
No, it's
relationship
every
with a
citizen's
convicted
right.
sex
Every
offender? Yeah,
citizen
yeah,
decides that for
yeah.
themselves.
Right. Exactly.
It's like
Exactly.
it's a free country.
You can't make people guilty by the mere fact that they had a bad choice of friends in Jeffrey Epstein. And that's the one thing that gets lost here, I think, is that people, if depending on what side they are, right or left or conservative or liberal, they're all hoping that the bad guy on the other side of the fence emerges in the Epstein files. And I think that clouds the judgment of whether or not this is ultimately a good idea. I mean, this goes against everything DOJ has in terms of policy. They don't release investigative materials like this, and not in this at this level of terabytes of photos and data and papers. And we're learning in real time that there's a good reason for that. And there are going to be people who are caught up. And I don't mean Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton has some accountability, but there are going to be people who are caught up in this, and it's not going to be good for them. And it's probably a punishment that does not meet anything they did wrong, which might be as simple as becoming friends with Jeffrey Epstein. And from what I understand, Epstein, was very, very persuasive in becoming friends with rich people because he had a reason to become friends with rich people.
And by
Isn't
the
it?
way, they could. I'm sorry, one more thing. They could have created a procedure. They could have taken Thomas Massey, and I don't know who the characters are, but the people that are known as the real fire breathers on Epstein,
Hmm.
and had them, and given them the is it remit? Is that the word? Given this, your task here is that you're going to be the final word on redactions, and you are to redact any private information that is not relevant to the our interest as you already laid it out. And and if the country is not satisfied with redacted documents by Thomas Massey, all right, then you know what? Because we all
Yeah.
know they're not going to be satisfied no matter what they see. They never are. But
Right.
the fact is that we have values, and it pains me to see again, like civil libertarian types like Thomas Massey, just trashing everything we're supposed to believe in for this prurient interest. Larry Summers had to resign from everything as a pilot. His basically his professional life is over for no reason other than he sent some emails to Jeffrey Epstein. There's no accusation whatsoever that he's involved in anything untoward with any prostitutes, underage women, no pedophilia, nothing.
Well,
Nothing.
it's an age-old discussion, right? I mean, it's what to what degree, and I think society differs dramatically on this issue, which is when somebody has makes cringeworthy personal choices in their life and they're people of power, how are we going to punish them? And it's always a case specific analysis because there's Bill Clinton made a comeback after a tremendous sex scandal. Donald Trump is unaffected by sex scandal, and I was just looking. I'm sure you've seen driving. If you drive to Jersey, there are still billboards for Jim McGreevy's back. He's running for mayor of Hoboken, and he was basically exiled. Jim McGreevy, the former governor of New Jersey, was exiled politically speaking. So there's really no science for figuring it out. But you're right. I mean, we've grappled for maybe centuries with the age old discussion of what do we do with someone who is a person of power, but something comes out about them, about their personal life that is cringeworthy,
I,
embarrassing, or immoral.
I mean, Danny, you must know this, but if you think about it, first of all, I know people who have remained friends with people who've done terrible things. Usually it's family members, but
Right.
anybody who's gone to prison for something awful, do we expect the people who've known them not to visit them in prison? Like, what are we doing here?
Right.
People
No, you're
maintain
exactly right.
relationships.
You're
And who
exactly right.
and
And
the
part of
holier than thou-ness of it all. How many hypocrites are out there, with pitchforks for Larry Summers, who in their own lives have looked the other way at people they know who have done horrible things? It makes me sick. Sorry.
no, you're absolutely right. I mean, everybody, especially people in positions of power, know somebody who has committed a crime, who has done something wrong, and a lot of us conceal that information. And the bottom line is, for a lot of people, the Epstein debate is conflating holding people responsible for being his friend and holding people responsible for actually doing something that was involved in child sex trafficking. And I would just add too, I mean, and again, this is something that is scary for me to say, but the Florida cases, and I don't recall exactly what they were, but Jeffrey Epstein hired such a unbelievably good legal team in Florida in '08 and '09. He got those crimes pleaded down to virtually nothing. So, as a person who's being accused of being friends with Epstein in the 2010s and 2020s, uh, to their knowledge, even if they were aware of his convictions, I believe it was just a state court. I think it was solicitation. I don't think it had anything to do with a minor. I could be
That's
wrong.
right. That's
But I
right.
believe it was just solicitation. That's what it was pleaded down to. So that's basically, visiting a prostitute. Now, is that what happened? I don't know. But if you're his friend, how deeply are you gonna investigate that before you do business with him or talk to him? Now, if you're out there saying you do a deep dive, you're out of line, Cevallos, you should deep dive everyone you do business with. Okay, that's a great normative idea. I don't think that's the way people normative meaning rule based, not norm.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great rule based idea. It's not realistic. People don't do that.
And
I have
in the end, we have. I'll let you go, Hatem. In the end, our whole system, the whole ball of wax depends on our understanding that people are free to make these decisions for themselves.
Yes.
The mob, we don't have a town square system of justice, and this is the town square. They haul Larry Summers out in the town square. They put a big scarlet
Yep.
letter on his forehead. This is exactly what we're embracing here. Somebody has an offensive decision they've made about their personal lives that is not something that the United States government uses as a rationalization for extrajudicial revealing of their most personal secrets. You're supposed to have warrants and a nexus and a judge, and it's all supposed to be done in a proper way. This is anarchy. Go ahead, Hatem. Go ahead.
a few things. One, is it crazy that somebody that's been around doing what they do, and like Epstein, and there is no videotapes or like real like what you learn from people like that, they always have like some kind of, backup of the most powerful. Like, do you have any explanation to something like that? That they don't have anything at all?
Well, I have to say this, and I've said this on air, is that everybody I feel like early on one of my things on TV is that we have such short memories, right? And here's what I mean by that. We've been talking about Jeffrey Epstein for at least 6, 7 years on air. And I've become very suspicious of any sentiment that it's right around the corner. All the stuff is going to come out about Epstein and Trump or Epstein and Clinton. It doesn't matter. But we've been saying that as if it's coming next week for 6, 7 years now, maybe 8 years. And that makes it very suspicious to me. Let me give you an example. Epstein has been criminally investigated since 2009 at least. And yet, the only photographs in all the studying of Epstein, all the documents revealed, everything, the sum total of all pictures we've seen of Trump and Epstein are the same 3 or 4 pictures that are always thrown up on TV. I know them when I see them. It's him and Melania and what's her name? And boy, I'm blanking on names today. It's
Ghislaine?
Ghislaine. Yeah, Ghislaine. It's To me, that tells me that as much as there's a huge amount of documents and photos in this release of documents, that I don't think we're going to get a lot of mega surprises. I mean, I think the Bill Clinton swimming in the pool was the biggest surprise. I was surprised by that. But think about it. We've had people combing through these documents through the weekend, and as far as I know, I may have missed something. It's easy to do. I haven't. There have been a few others that are shady, suspicious, whatever. But I rather expected we wouldn't see a huge number of bombshells. And maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe
But
tonight
my
Nah, you'll be.
someone will uncover it.
but
By
my
the way, I
point.
think it's Ghislaine. I'm not sure. But listen, this is my take on it.
But let me just
But
add
you want
to
go
my
ahead, go ahead, go
question.
ahead.
Yeah, my
Sorry, sorry,
point.
sorry, sorry.
No, no, to that, so you can answer. My point is, him doing business like that allowed the powerful and famous to trust him to do what they do, because usually people will have some kind of videotapes or like to blackmail or stuff like that. But the way he did business looks like it was for that reason. Go ahead, no.
I'm just gonna say, in the last 2 years of the war in Israel, how many times it's just been like Netanyahu and Trump, or Netanyahu and his close circle of war cabinet advisors, and there's some conversation and some decision is made, and this is the most sensitive, most important secrets for a nation's survival, and the next day you read about it in the paper, right? And somehow
Right.
we think that in this conspiracy that involves, dozens, hundreds, who knows how many people had to have known about some aspect of the servant, the waitress, somebody must have seen something, right? That doesn't, somehow nobody comes forward with information. And
Yeah.
to me, it's just clear
I
that
agree with you.
that's the reason, is because it doesn't exist, because that's not the way the real world works. You don't have highly, highly explosive, gossipy, prurient, interesting information like this, and everybody's just keeping it a secret for years. It's just, when has that ever happened? It
And
So
doesn't
wait,
to
happen.
add to
can I
you,
just add?
there's
Go
two
ahead, Hatem.
different,
Go ahead.
there's the Republican and then the Democrats before them. So if somebody had something on the other, they would have released it already.
That's
You know,
right.
so that shows you that they both don't. Go ahead, Danny. Sorry.
I know I'm going to say something I think that could be taken very controversial, but I don't think it is. And I have to make a disclosure here. I am involved in Epstein related litigation. I'm defending people in the Virgin Islands government who have been sued by victims. And all I can say is this, is that to have a real discussion, I've said this on air, and I got into an argument with someone on MSNBC on my last MSNBC appearance, which is people are talking about that there are thousands of Epstein victims, but there is a lot, the spectrum of victims is a very, very wide spectrum. Here's what I mean. Anyone, obviously, who is a minor is the worst kind of victim. That is the horrors of what Epstein did. But there may also be victims who are not minors, who are well beyond minority age, not well, because he liked them young looking. And to some degree, I don't think they would come off as victimy as others. I don't know how else to say that, but there were a lot of people who were adults of majority, and I don't know that they were as trafficked as, I mean, actually they would be trafficked because some of the statutory definitions of trafficking don't require against your will. For example, the Mann Act, which is not technically the Trafficking Act, but that's just transportation for prostitution. Consent has nothing to do with it. So I think there's a huge spectrum of victims, and obviously there are victims who are minors, and that's horrific. But there may be victims, and again, take this with a grain of salt because I have as a client someone being sued by victims in the Virgin Islands government, but there's a huge spectrum of victims here as well.
I mean, if I would say if I could say what the mainstream morality and all this would be, let me get in big trouble now. But I think what the mainstream morality is that basically everybody understands that young girls, minors of below, we could argue the age, this is just a fucking outright crime and a moral
Absolutely.
disgrace, right?
Yep, horrible.
Then there's ages maybe 17-ish where even the states don't agree, where we'd say, well, having sex with a girl that age is already questionable. Um, uh, 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 Paying her to have sex, in other words, using the fact that she's obviously troubled opportunistically, this is also criminal and disgusting. Meaning, like, yeah, maybe if this was your 17-year-old girlfriend, that, like Woody Allen in the movie Manhattan, that would be already a bit much for us. But knowing that she's a troubled young girl who's probably been prostitute for since she was younger, and now you're going to take
Yep,
advantage of her, you're
yep.
also disgusting. And then
All disgusting.
yeah, and deserve no sympathy. And you can't even plead the fact that 17 is borderline, what I'm saying. And then you have adults who are now victims, and they're considered victims by the same people fighting for sex worker rights. right? Like this is a little bit much for me. Like Mamdani's out there, we need to legalize sex work. But Epstein victims are 19, 20-year-old girls who were trafficked, put them in jail. This obviously doesn't hold up, right? So now you're into a moral panic ground.
Right.
Those are the categories that I see.
No, I do. I see there is I mean, everything that went on was bad, but there are people who are victims for whom this is absolutely the worst tragedy ever. And for adults, and especially to the extent any of them were, willing participants, which you can be as an adult, it's possible. It's maybe less so. Still
Mhm.
victims, but there is a huge, huge disparity among victims. And again, that's the view of someone who's defending a case. It's all bad, but it is. The point I'm trying to make is that it's not always as cut and dry. It's not always as clear and binary
By the way,
as you might think.
what does the law say if a guy goes to a prostitute, right?
Mhm.
And he really doesn't know she's underage. What does the law that's not a defense at all, huh?
So it is a it can be a defense if there's lack of knowledge, but you ordinarily there are surrounding if there is a true lack of knowledge, if the person was deceived, you may have a defense. But the problem is there's usually a lot of contextual hints because someone who looks 18 might look 16. So that's not good either. The other thing that's really interesting is during the Diddy trial, I was amazed at how many people, smart people, were completely unaware that prostitution was illegal. There are a lot of people who are not aware that so they're not aware that if people are consensually exchanging money for sex, that's illegal. I mean, and going to your point, Noam, you're exactly right. I mean, to the extent there may have been the sex trafficking laws do target prostitution. Obviously, most of them target forced or compelled or coercion. But the Mann Act is a good example where it doesn't require, it just requires interstate travel and prostitution. And it criminalizes it. And yet at the same time, there are people like the future mayor of New York who is advocating for legalizing sex work.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those sort of contradictions are things I kind of hone in on.
What about
Yeah.
the legality of the location of his island? Like, did he choose it for that reason or for what?
I'm sure he did. I practiced down there, so I know the island very well. I've known it for, years before anyone was even talking about Jeffrey Epstein. And I'll tell you this, the scuttlebutt down in the U.S. Virgin Islands about Epstein was that he was bad news long before we were talking about him. So I'm talking like 2005, 2006, 2007. I mean, everybody was aware of Epstein, and a lot of people had bad things to say about him. And you go by that island, and it's just sort of ominous. It looks very different. It had flags running along the ridge. It was very, very visible. But the U.S. Virgin Islands is essentially a state, and you have the same jurisdiction. You do have local laws that obviously they have local sex abuse laws. They also have a federal presence. It's exactly like any other state in that sense, although constitutionally lots of differences. But I think you're right, Noam. I think he chose the Virgin Islands
That was me.
because it's one of the few places you can get your own island. And you're right. I mean, you're going to have to send people out on boats, DPNR, to circle it and stare at it if you want to do surveillance on them.
Yeah.
And anyone who has an island, they have a measure of privacy and security that the rest of us just don't have. So I think that had something to do with it.
And also, I think the name of maybe you can clear this out for anybody. The name of Epstein files. It seems like I think that's one of them making people like have a conspiracy theory. It's like it seems like there's files of pictures and videos and stuff, but it's just a term, right? It's record pretty much.
Well, it refers to a bunch of different things. It can really what we're talking about now is everything that's in the possession of DOJ. And DOJ is pack rats. Like they collect everything. You see, they collected all kinds of files from everywhere. I mean, they just have they collect anything that's interesting. And so that's really what we're talking about with the Epstein files is today is the release starting on Friday due to a federal statute passed by Congress requiring DOJ to release these files. And DOJ did not truly meet the deadline because they're releasing them on an ongoing basis. They were supposed to release everything by Friday. But here's the funny thing about the statute. An enforcement mechanism, there's no penalty. So DOJ, being DOJ, probably saw that and they said, look, as long as we get started on this date, what are they going to do? Come after us? I mean, the statute says release them. We're releasing them. We'll finish
Well,
when we're finished.
I got two things. One is a statement, the other is a question. So, anybody's ever had a huge project and they had 30 days to do it understands it's very easy not to be able to meet a deadline. When you're
Oh
talking about
yeah,
terabytes of data that needs to be
sure.
redacted, meaning human, you need human decisions on all this stuff.
Every
It's,
page.
yeah, it's totally plausible to me that in total good faith, they weren't able to meet the deadline. Of course, they do a terrible job of explaining themselves. But my question is this: Epstein must have been a tremendously charismatic, unusual person.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you have Noam Chomsky, like, who hates rich people to begin with, right? And he's hanging out on the plane with them. Has anybody spoken candidly about the magnetism of this man and how they were taken in by him?
I've read for example, Filthy Rich, which is the book, and it dates. I mean, it's an old book. It's probably over a decade old, and it that goes into some detail about it. But to your point, not only does he come off as this incredibly charismatic guy, but I can't, to this day, I don't think anyone's convincingly told me what it is he did. And it's just so suspicious. And it's so Emperor's New Clothes that here's this guy who was in every circle of power. No one's entirely sure what he did, except that he may have been involved with the former Victoria's Secret owner and made a lot of money from him. But I don't even know if that's true. But yes, I mean, you're so right, Noam. He must have been breathtakingly charming because, I mean, the one thing that emerges from these files is that everybody in power loved this guy, loved him. I mean, and by the way, politicians who are at least on some level, you have to expect doing an analysis of is this a bad person for me to be around? I mean,
Yeah.
they have to be a little suspicious, and yet he got his way in with everybody, and having billions of dollars, that helps.
Well, I think it goes
But it
back to
is
my
remarkable.
point when I was saying they also like the fact that he was very private. Nothing was come out. There's no pictures, there's no
Well,
leaks, there's no videos.
now, this is going to make people pop their blood vessels, but there are very few important people who had the sense to cut him off. One of them was Donald Trump.
Right? Right? No, he did. And no, it's true. Trump did cut him off. And, much
Yeah.
is made of he cut him off maybe because of what he knew about him. But, that's another interesting thing we sort of get into, which is a lot of the Epstein controversy is I hear voices saying, well, people should be accountable for not reporting or, sounding the alarm. But to sound the alarm, you have to know or see something. And even then, there is no legal duty for citizens to rat on each other. There never has been. I mean, if you have a separate duty, if you're a police officer or a lifeguard and you see someone drowning, sometimes you have a legal duty to report. School teachers are mandated reporters. But if you're, one billionaire talking to another billionaire and you see him hanging around with young women, I mean, is in a perfect world, would you have liked Donald Trump to run to the police and say, hey, these girls look too young? Yeah, but keep in mind, there's no legal duty to do that. And our country it would be problematic if there was. If we had a legal duty to report everybody that is suspicious to the police, it would be like we're in Cuba. And so, I mean, that's not a situation we want either. Do we wish more people reported on Epstein back in the day? Yes, but those same people, man, I wonder if they themselves would do it, or if they would just say to themselves, "I don't want any trouble. This guy's rich and powerful. I'm going to pretend I didn't see that." Because those are usually the most vocal people about, inform on everybody.
But I think it's
Actually,
different I think
wait,
it's
I was gonna
different
say,
when you report somebody back in the day, and then after 2009, when they knew what's going on and they give him a crazy sentencing. I think the government should have came back and tried to do something.
well, you
Well,
can't come back.
yeah, you can't really come back and revisit it. And, look, I agree. If you read that book, Filthy Rich, as a defense attorney,
It's
it's one
also
of
a
those.
Netflix special. People can watch it.
Yeah, I feel so grossly inadequate when I read that because I'm blown away at the deal they got. I mean, sometimes it's probably like watching a comic that is like just so amazing. You think, oh gosh, how can I be a comic? It's the same thing. I see the deal that they got, and I can't explain it. I cannot explain it. And I do not blame everyone for thinking this is a classic case of rich guy gets different justice than poor person. By the way, that is what this is. I mean, there's just no way a public defender is going to get the kind of deal that Jeffrey Epstein got, which was don't even go to jail. He's locked up in his mansion, and rolls into work once in a while. He's got work release. I mean, it was the most amazing deal in American criminal history in my mind,
Yeah.
and that's why people are
But
rightfully frustrated by it, but I don't think they should be, that shocked. I mean,
but could
it's
but could it also go to the quality of the underlying evidence? I mean,
so yeah. I'll give you an example. One of the things that motivated law enforcement to offer the deal to Epstein was their view that some of these complainants, these victims, yes, they were underage, but they had extensive juvenile histories, which made them less than credible. And to that I say, okay, but it's often the case that victims might have credibility issues because predators target people
right.
who have credibility issues. If you're a predator, you're not going to go after someone necessarily, a girl who attends the top prep, private school and is picked up by mom and dad and dropped off every day. You're going to target the forlorn shoplifting kid who's got lots of problems at home who might be, you might be able to bamboozle. So, I
Yeah.
mean, that's just the facts of life. I mean,
Yeah, but there was and
unfortunately,
there's so many of them. But that goes to I was trying to say that I don't know if I really communicated that these people are troubled. The victims
yeah,
here are I mean they
they
wouldn't
are.
be victims of this sex trafficking if they weren't troubled in their lives in some way. And now it's like we hold that against them.
Yep.
The fact
Yep.
that they're
And
troubled now
let
we
me,
can't trust you in court.
and I'll finish just very quickly. That
Yeah.
ended up being some of the justification that the law enforcement felt these victims wouldn't be credible in court. And to that I say, you charge cases all the time
Yeah.
on, the very essence of sex assault is often there's only two witnesses, the victim and the defendant. So there's always credibility problems. So I am surprised, and I wouldn't be,
Can I
to
add
me,
to
I read,
that?
but yeah,
Can I
sure.
add to that? I'm sorry, because on a moral level, I would also, if I were in a room, I'd make the case, look, the deal that we're planning to accept here for these reasons that you've just laid out is really like no punishment at all.
Right,
So you know what? Take the friggin' thing to trial. What are we risking here now? That the difference
right,
between
right.
what we're gonna give him and nothing, which is basically nothing. Let's say we have only an 80% chance of conviction. We prefer a 95% chance. But the crime is so heinous, take it to trial.
Yep. Yep. No, and by the way, that's
If
a
he was
whole
going to plead
nother.
to 5 years, you say, all right,
Yep.
we're going to get 5 years at him. We're going to give him nothing. Well, already giving him nothing. So what are we talking about?
And by the way, it's so interesting. There's a philosophical argument that plea bargaining is actually bad for justice because we have a system where, prosecutors, and I'm a defense attorney, so take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, they'll indict on the highest charges they can get, knowing they can plead them down. But imagine, just do a thought experiment. What if we had a system where there was no plea bargaining, that every single case, every prosecutor had to be expected to take it to trial, and there was no plea bargaining allowed? By the way, if you think that's impossible, we do that already. For example, in New Jersey, in most jurisdictions with DUIs, they don't allow plea bargaining. And that's because, I could go into the reasons for that, but they do not normally allow plea bargaining in a lot of jurisdictions. Imagine if we did that with every case. There's one thing that it would absolutely result in. Prosecutors would only indict on the charges they thought they could prove, not the ones that they want to overcharge and maybe get to the middle with a negotiation. So that's very interesting. I mean, if everybody had that obligation to put up or shut up, how different our legal system would be. And would it be more just or less just? That I don't know the answer to, but it's an interesting thought experiment.
It would be more just, I believe, because I've heard so many stories about the unjust, the immoral character of the prosecutors. And then it may be only a small number of them, but the stories just are outrageous. Like I could get charged with something. I won't even know that the discovery is reliable or what the prosecution is going to share with me. I might plead guilty to anything if they gave me 6 months, right? I don't know what the
That's the
hell
thing.
I'm up against, and it's no matter how innocent I was, it's very it's scary. So you really, if you're going to have plea bargaining, you really require very ethical law enforcement, very ethical and prosecutors. And I think even if they start out ethical, like so many things, they get a nerve, they start making compromises, and I don't know. There's no perfect system, obviously, right? That's what people have
No,
trouble understanding.
no,
Danny,
definitely not. There's
three quick other stories that I just want to take your title opinion on, before we go. One is Netanyahu said that he'll be traveling to NYC. Can he be arrested?
No,
What's a legal? No,
Danny.
I know what you like, Norm, but
No, he's not. How can they arrest him? Go ahead, Danny. Danny knows
yeah,
more.
what's a
I'm sorry,
legal
you cut
like
out for a second. Who's traveling to NYC?
Netanyahu.
Oh,
Netanyahu?
Netanyahu.
Yeah,
Netanyahu. No, typically he has immunity. So he would not be arrested here. You mean for the International Criminal Court?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he usually would have immunity. So I believe he could travel here.
All right. The other one is
Sorry,
the
Hatem. You can make a citizen's arrest though.
I will. No, but I'm surprised that nobody brought it's a simple answer and nobody brought it during the election when Mom Daniel said I'm gonna arrest him, and even when they say Trump is like, well, I'm gonna release him, is like it seems like
You're right. Al Jazeera didn't cover that, but if you read other sources, you might have come across
no, the
that. Or
CNN and everybody else didn't say. All right, the next one is the Macron Kansas Owen defamation lawsuit.
Yeah. The Macron. Wait, read the headline one more time. I'm
The
sorry.
the the, the
I couldn't hear
French
you so well. Go
President
ahead.
Macron
Yep.
defamation lawsuit against Kansas Owens.
Yeah. Yeah. This is fascinating to me because the essence of a defamation case is that the statements are false. So if you're willing to file a defamation lawsuit, you have to prove that the statements are false. And through discovery, you have to be willing to let that information come out, which is why a lot of cases, high profile cases, would-be plaintiffs don't file defamation cases because they have a lot to lose. And it's very interesting. Relatedly, Trump has started filing defamation cases where he's mostly held back on doing so. I'm very surprised, and I don't have an answer for why he's choosing to do that because it puts a lot of his life in issue for discovery. So that's one of the necessary evils of a defamation lawsuit. If you're a plaintiff, is
he,
you got to
he he
put all
wants to
that in
settle. He
issue.
wants to settle. He wants to settle. But go ahead. Go
Yeah,
go go.
but people are going to
McCarthy.
get discovery. They're going to get to
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
into his money bags and his financials and other stuff. So I mean, that's the risk.
But also he have to
Well,
prove
no, but what about Candace Owens? So what do you think is going to happen? This case fascinates me.
Yeah, it does fascinate me too because I mean, Candace Owens has said from for a long time, I have rock solid proof. I mean, she's as convinced gets.
Yeah.
So, I mean, presumably she's going to put that up and the standard is not simply is it false? The standard is it false? And in the case of a public figure, were they essentially willfully blind? There's the malice standard of New York Times v. Sullivan, but I think that's so confusing because people think it means like some intentional ill will or anger. It really just means ignoring obvious red flags in your reporting that it might be false. For example, if your source says, I know this happened because I was there, but there's all kinds of reasons to think that the source was actually in a whole nother country at the time of the incident. If there's all this information that you're confronted with that should give you a doubt about your information, that's the kind of actual malice standard for a public figure. So
So
it's not just enough that it's false. It's not a
the, the
strict liability rule.
the game theory of this fascinates me, and I have to presume, since we're dealing with sane, intelligent people here, that what my analysis is most likely correct. You're talking about a case here, and it's a unique case in this sense, where the plaintiff has 100% ability to prevail if they're telling the truth, meaning that all they have to do is give DNA, right? Like there's no interpretation here. There's with 100% certainty, if Brigitte Macron is a woman, she knows going into this case, she is going to win. She's going to prove it.
Yeah.
So I have to believe that she's prepared to do that because the humiliation of suing Candace Owens and then backing off at some point in the future and refusing to give DNA evidence is going to make everybody, even including me, think, dude, you're a man, right? Like there's no way out of that. So
Right.
I
Right.
have to believe that this is where it's going.
Yep. It can only go there. You're absolutely right. And by the way, even if Macron proves that she is a female, that's again, the standard is beyond it. The question then becomes, okay, so it was false. Then the question is, what was the intent? What was the knowledge that
Well,
Owens
that's
had?
that's for like if they really want damages and all that stuff, which I don't think they really care about that part of the case. They just want Candace Owens proven to be a liar. They don't really
Right.
care if they prevail
Right.
on whether she knowingly did it or blah blah blah, right? That's what you're getting at, right?
Well, no, I'm getting at yes, and the standard for defamation, which is not
Yeah,
just the falsity. It's not just
right.
the falsity, because there are a lot of things we could report that are false if we were given tons of information to believe that it was true. And you can think of a million historical and
Right.
political examples. If there was plenty of information showing that something was true, then you can report on it, and you won't meet that malice standard. But on the other hand, if there was plenty of information that Candace Owens was confronted with, if say she researched it and somehow got a hold of medical records, and time again she sees that Macron is a female, that would be the kind of deliberate disregard of obvious facts, sticking your head in the sand, that would support defamation.
Yeah, I read the complaint. The complaint was pretty convincing, but in the end, it's going to come down to DNA. I don't see how it can't.
Well, that's it. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the crux of that. That is the. You're right, and I love when you can distill a lawsuit down to. I mean, rare is the case you can distill it down to such a simple question that is so easily answered.
But
Yeah.
I think it's bad for the French president and his wife, because it's either it's going to be dismissed, which is going to create more theories, or they're going to have to provide something, and she's gonna
As long
In
as you
my
provide
view,
something, it's great.
it's just my opinion. Going with what Noam was saying, that to me, this is not a scientific conclusion, but the mere fact that they've filed a lawsuit signals to me that they're ready to prove conclusively, beyond a scientific doubt, that
Yeah.
she is a woman. I
But
mean, you don't
what if
file a
what if the
lawsuit
court just
as fluff.
did motion to dismiss of the court?
What's that?
What if the court dismissed the case?
Well, I mean, I guess they could in theory. I don't know what the basis would be. I mean, maybe on a jurisdictional ground,
Yeah.
that wouldn't mean anything. I mean, that doesn't go to the merits of the case. But I mean, all if they get to the merits, as Noam put it, it's a pretty binary. It's as binary a decision that a court has ever had to make.
Yeah, I guess that's a no-brainer.
All right. This was awesome. Do you have any other questions, Noam, before we go?
No, this was awesome. Danny's the best guest ever. He really is.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
he
love
is.
you guys.
And we have
Yeah,
a new
let me.
show gonna happen. Can I promote my new show? It's gonna be at the
Sure.
Trump Kennedy Center.
And if I may, if I may promote, I relaunched the Danny Cevallos podcast video component to everything. It's on all the platforms today. It went out today. I had done it during the Trump trial last year, and we relaunched it. It comes out today, the Danny Cevallos show. Hope you can check it out.
And it's really amazing. Like watching Danny and anything is just so entertaining, so informative. And I'm releasing Danny's talk this week, but after Christmas at the Danny Cevallos
Oh,
talk.
great.
Yes, I'll
So
keep it
cool.
in. But Noam, what do you think of the renaming the JFK Center with the Trump
Oh
Kennedy
my God.
Center?
It's horrible. I can't believe anybody on planet
Terrible.
Earth, next to Macron. I mean, this is the most binary decision. Like, how could he do such a thing?
So ridiculous.
It's just disgusting.
So ridiculous.
All right.
All
Well,
right, gang.
Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, everything, Hanukkah, and all. Thank you very much. Thank you, Danny.
I
Great.
like that.
Love you
Hanukkah was an
guys.
afterthought. Okay.
Let me make my sentimental statement. Happy holidays. I love you guys. You've been my friends for almost a decade now, and I am thrilled to be a part of your world. Thank you so much for
It's
having
very
me.
nice of you, Danny. We feel the same. I feel the same. I can't speak for Hatem. I feel the same way.
He knows how I feel.
Love you guys.
All right.
Take it
Thank
easy.
you.